Hi there, Michelle Short here for My Favourite Things. Today I'm creating a galaxy background for my cute balloon besties critter. So I'm starting off with a panel of white cardstock. This is cut to 4¼ inches by 5½ inches, and I'm just temporarily adhering that onto my craft mat. And then I'm taking the circle Extraordinaire stencil and I'm placing that in the top kind of centre of the panel. Just making sure that that's stuck really well down with some post-it tape. I do reuse this tape, by the way, in case you're wondering. I do reuse it. I do use a lot, but I do reuse it. I managed to drop my first colour of distress ink here onto the panel, so that's where my peacock feathers ended up. So that's going along more towards the kind of bottom left hand side. And then I'm going to add wilted violet above that. I am using distress inks today so that I can get a little bit of a reaction with some water. So just adding that towards the top, and then going in with my other colour, which is the picked raspberry, onto the right hand side. I do lose quite a lot of the colours after I finish the card because my critter kind of covers them, but you do sort of see the glow behind it, so I'm glad that I did it in this way. But sometimes you kind of need to think about what critters or anything else that's going to go on top. I'm using the chipped sapphire colour here just to go over those colours, just to blend them between the black that I'm going to add on and those colours. So next I'm going in with black soot here. And I'm going to go all the way around the outside of the circle, and then I'm going to go and add some inside of the circle as well. It does cover up the colours, but you can kind of see the glow through them, and I do go back in and add some more of the colours in between as well. When you add the black onto a galaxy background, it always looks like an absolute mess. I think galaxy backgrounds always tend to look worse before they look better. So next I'm going to go back in with those colours again, especially this purple here at the top. I did lose that quite a bit. Although I'm going over black, you can kind of see the colour sort of seeping through, and I think that does look really pretty. And then I'm going to go back in with the peacock feathers again, and then I do add a little bit of the picked raspberry to the right hand side, but that colour you can pretty much see, I think, quite well. I do go back in with the black soot once again just to really darken up those edges, and then I've added some water onto my craft mat here, and I'm just splattering that onto the panel. I'm not going to get a huge reaction with the colours purely because I'm using plain white cardstock rather than watercolour paper, but it does give a mottled effect, and I do think that that's quite nice for the galaxy. I don't want to leave the water too long on the panel though, because I don't want it to seep underneath the stencil. So I'm just blotting that up with a cloth. And then I'm going to add the stars into the galaxy, and I'm using Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed-proof white paint for this, adding a small amount onto my craft mat. I do actually end up having quite a lot on there. I don't need that much. This does go quite a long way. I have added a little bit of water to that, and then I'm going to splatter that onto the panel here, and that's going to create the stars, and this is where I think the kind of galaxy comes to life. So I'm adding quite a lot of splatter there, and then I can peel back that stencil, and this is always my favourite part so that you can see what it looks like underneath, and then I can set that panel aside to dry. Next I'm taking the bunny with the balloons image from the Balloon Besties stamp set, and I'm stamping that onto some white cardstock. I'm going to use extreme black ink for this. This is a great ink that works with lots of different colouring mediums, and today I'm using Copic markers. So I'm going to stamp that down a couple of times just so that I get a really nice dark impression. And then I can colour the bunny with Copic markers. So I'm using some brown shades for the bunny. I'm going in first with E59, which is my darkest shade, and I want to leave a slight area to the left hand side where the darkest area is to create a highlight there. I think this works quite well with rounded images. and also works quite well if the light source is behind the image. Now, we're obviously not going for realism here with a bunny flying on balloons with a galaxy background, but like I said, I think it just adds a little bit of interest to the image and just helps it make it look a little bit more dimensional. So next I'm going in with E57 just to blend that darkest shade out. It's very difficult on the legs just because they're so tiny, so I do lose a little bit of that white highlight, but that's okay. Next I'm going in with E55 and I'm just blending the E57 and the E55 together. Sometimes I do find that this takes a little bit of work, but you get there in the end. And then I can go in with my lightest shade, which is the E53. And I'm just going to blend that out, and then I'm going to go over all of the area where the white highlight is with that E53 shade. I don't want it to be completely stark white, but I do want it to be lighter than the rest of the image. So I'm just going around there. I don't want to go over it too many times because it can start sort of bleeding out the darkest shade. Obviously you can go back in a few times to kind of neaten up the area with the darkest shades if you want to, but I try and avoid that if I can. For the snout, I'm using E55, E53, E51 and E50. And then for the ears, I apologise that the camera kind of goes in and out of focus there, but I'm using R02, R00 and R12. Next, for the balloons, I'm doing the same thing and adding in that highlight. So for the first balloon here, I'm using BG49, BG15, BG13 and BG11. I do lose quite a lot of the highlight on these balloons. The lighter shades have got quite a lot of colourless blender in them, and it does bleed out quite a bit of that colour. Like I said, you can go back in and darken up the darker areas, but I wasn't too concerned because I wanted the most of the focus to be on the bunny itself. For the pink balloon here, I'm using RV66, RV55 and RV52. Then when I go on to the purple balloon, I accidentally go in with the aqua shade and instead of the purple shades, which I want to use. Ordinarily, I would really take my time to try and bleed out the colour. Thankfully, you can do that with Copic markers. You can kind of bleed out one colour to another. But this actually is the second time that I'm colouring in this image, and it's not the final image that's going to end up on the card. My footage went slightly wrong with my first colouring, so this is my second lot. It's not going to go on the card. If it was going to go on the card, I would spend a bit more time on it, but hopefully you understand that I'm not doing that in the video. So for the purple balloon, I used V17, V15 and V12. And then the ink did bleed slightly on that aqua balloon, so I'm just going in with a white gel pen just to cover that up. Next, I want to add some clouds to my galaxy background, but I don't want them to stand out too much. I want them to kind of fade into the background as such. So I'm using translucent vellum for this. Vellum is always very difficult to adhere without the adhesive showing, so I'm adding some adhesive sheet onto the back of the vellum, and the idea of that is so that when you stick down the vellum you're not going to be able to actually see the adhesive because it's completely covering over the clouds. I do make a bit of a boo-boo and you'll see that a bit later on in the video, but for now I'm just adding that adhesive sheet onto the back of the translucent vellum, and then I can die cut those out using the Petite Cloud Die-namics. And then I'm also going to cut out the bunny using the Birthday Besties Die-namics as well. So I can just run those both through my die cutting machine, and I did cut the clouds twice just so that I've got a few more to pick which size I want. My background panel is dry now, so I'm going to add adhesive onto the back of that, and then I'm going to adhere that down onto an A2 sized white card base, so that's a finished size of 4¼ inches by 5½ inches, and I'm using some tape runner there just to adhere that down flat. And then I can use my bone folder just to make sure that that's really well adhered down. I have stamped out my sentiment from the Birthday Besties set, and I have white heat embossed that onto black cardstock and cut that out with a Skinny Strips Die-namics. And now I am placing all of my images down onto the panel just so that I can see where I want them to go before I adhere them down. Once I'm happy with the placement, I can remove the backings off of the vellum pieces. And then I can stick those down, and this is where I made a boo-boo. I pressed down on the vellum, but I didn't actually press down over the entire cloud. So unfortunately, you do actually see the adhesive, which was completely the wrong point of me putting the adhesive sheet onto the back of it. So at this point, I either could have replaced the clouds and used the heavyweight vellum, or I could have just made sure to press down over the entire cloud, and then you wouldn't really see that adhesive. But I didn't think of that at the time. I kind of carried on, and I added some foam tape onto the back of the bunny piece here, and I'm just removing the backings of that so that I can place him down onto the galaxy. And then I can stick the sentiment down as well, and I want to make sure that it's flush with those balloons, so I'm just going to add foam tape onto the right hand side. And then where it's overlapping the balloons, I can just add a tiny little bit of foam adhesive inside the balloon strings. Just making sure that that's going to stick down nicely. And then I can remove the backings and place that down. And still at this point, I could have pressed down that vellum, but I didn't. So to cover up the adhesive showing, I'm using some small dabs of On Point Precision glue, and I'm just adding some iridescent bubbles on top of the clouds. And this is going to cover up that adhesive, but like I said, I really could have not had that problem in the first place. But this is the thing about card making, you learn as you go, and it's always a nice experience. So that's the card finished for today. I do think that bunny is just absolutely adorable, flying along in front of the galaxy. Links to the products that I used will be in the description bar here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.